the caged bird sings. It's daybreak in Riften. The heat of the sun stews the sewage in the canals into an unbearable stench of death and decay. This is not a city of safety or comfort. Peasants and beggars walk side by side in the narrow streets as they try to make their daily bread. Some steal, some swindle, some even kill. The gods have long forgotten Riften, only nocturnal mists serving to remind the city of her gloomy influence. You don't come here to find life, you come here to slowly decay and die. The people would say, we are a proud people. Proud of what? Proud of dirt and disease, and the boot upon the neck of the masses. The inns feed you food of dubious origin, made with ingredients purchased from suppliers unwilling to disclose their sources. The whole city reeks of secrets. The reek of secrets, more pungent and despicable than even the sewage in the canals. What authority exists here? Only the authority of repression and power, represented by the city's most powerful family. The Blackbriars. The Jarl. Widely understood to be merely a figurehead for the family to meddle in local governance. Layla Lawgiver is a fool with less ability to see than a farmer and only slightly more intelligent. There has been no change since she took power, and the people are not expecting that to change. Downtrodden, soiled, and defeated. That is the life of the proud denizens of Riften. What beggars are not trying to swindle or rob you, are lying in the streets, drugged beyond comprehension by a potent new kind of red skooma. Nothing good can grow here. It would be like a flower growing in a field of sulfur and brimstone. The spirit of the people has been beaten into compliance, strangled to the point of apathy. The Blackbriars spread their web far across and all throughout the city. It is better to lie and profess your love for them, than to risk being heard speaking ill of them. Most despicable of their hands was Maul. Maul spent his days loitering outside shops, and harassing people moving to and fro inside the city walls. His arrogance and temper were well known to all, and many knew to be cautious after he had his meed. Fathers would bribe him not to lust after their daughters, with only a grain speck of confidence that he would honor the bribe. In fact, many of the daughters would find his affections forced upon them, an inevitable expression of his lack of moral character. The greed and lust of Maul paled in comparison to his master, the whore Maven Blackbriar. For Maven was a deeper kind of evil, the kind of evil that embeds itself deep within. Much like how a thorn in the heel develops into pus and infection. Maven had her hand and ear in every level of the city. The Empire, with its thin control, was no more than a paper hand for Maven to effortlessly fold and tear to her needs. Imperial law had no more control on Maven Blackbriar than did the moral tissue of her own soul. She was ruthless, willing and able to do anything to hold on to power. Why should she not? It was power that kept the Blackbriars' pockets fat and their bodies adorned with furs. To her, it simply wouldn't be sensible to discard her fineries, and sit in the filth with commoners. The plight of those commoners, however, was much more grim. Those who could afford to stayed in board houses, where tissue-thin sheets barely kept off the cold that came in through cracks on the spider-infested walls. Those who couldn't afford it slept on the streets. The plight of children was no better. Those unlucky enough to be without parents were taken into the care of Grelod the Kind. Such a name has never been so profanely given to any beneath the sky of Tamriel. For Grelod was not kind, in fact she was quite cruel. She let out her anger onto the children regularly and frequently. It was not uncommon to see the orphans leave the orphanage with bruises on their faces or arms. The orphans were only allowed to leave so that they could beg, and amass coin for Grelod to squander on drink and cards. When Grelod lost at cards, she would beat the children. When she ran out of drink, she would strangle them, otherwise she simply spoke poison into their hearts. In such a place as this, how could the children ever dream of change? On such a day, as the morning sun caused the stink to rise up in the air, a stranger came into town. The figure entered the great city gates wearing a long and tattered cloak. The hood was pulled high over their face, and they walked lightly on leather boots. The figure continued into town for only a moment before being accosted by Maul. "Who do you think you are, stranger? You seem to have something to hide the way you're dressed." Maul sneered. The figure replied with almost a whisper, betraying a woman's voice. "I'm just passing through." Maul's countenance became irritated with the stranger's aloofness. "Listen, stranger, I'm known as Maul around these parts, and if you knew any better you would make sure to show me respect. I represent the Blackbriars." The figure remained unmoved. Maul continued, "Identify yourself, stranger, your evasiveness is getting on my nerves." "What's it to you then?" This response clearly agitated Maul further. A nearby woman who happened to be eavesdropping began to hastily walk away, anticipating a violent clash. Maul replied, face becoming redder, "Listen, stranger, don't say something you're going to regret. You seem to be new here, so I'll grant you the grace of explaining to you one time and one time only. Here, the name Blackbriar carries more weight than the 8 divines, and that would make me like a champion of the gods. So you'd better observe your place." The figure chuckled, "I'm not afraid of you, Maul." To this Maul lost his composure, however he seemed to reason that losing his cool to this stranger would only embarrass him in the long run. So he instead collected his nerves and simply spat out, "You aren't worth my time, piss off." After which Maul walked off to find drink. A little beggar girl then approached the figure, eyes wide and impressed. "Wow, stranger, I've never seen anyone stand their ground to Maul like that before. You must be really brave or really stupid." The figure turned towards the little beggar girl so that her face could be seen under her hood. She had a scar on her right cheekbone, dark hair, and brilliant blue eyes. Her eyes betrayed a sense of understanding and warmth. She knelt down to the girl's level and smiled before saying, "Little sister, there are many fearsome creatures in this world. That man is nothing more than a dog, trained to bark for its masters." The beggar girl shrugged, "If you say so, miss, but if Maul is a dog I guess we're all rabbits." She continued, "Anyways, my name is Anya." The strange woman smiled again, placing her hand on Anya's shoulder. "Yes, Anya, but what is a dog to a dragon?" The stranger then gave the girl a little sack of septims. "Give 10 of these to Grelad, the gods know she will ask it of you when you return to her tonight. Keep the rest for yourself, and keep it secret." Anya took the sack. "Wait, I didn't tell you about Grelad, how do you know?" However, the stranger simply stood up and walked away, leaving Anya to ponder on her words. Anya returned to the orphanage after the sun began to set. She had tied the sack of gold to a post under the dock and then threw the sack into the canal. It was disgusting, but Anya knew nobody would try to fish it out that way. With the money, Anya had bought herself a boiled pastry, which she eagerly consumed next to the canal. She entered the orphanage, eager to avoid Grelad's wrath via the 10 septims she had brought with her. Grelad looked her up and down. "Well, you little wretch, have you been industrious today? Or must I discipline you?" "No, I was able to get these for you," Anya said as she presented the 10 septims, her face devoid of emotion. "It's yours, m." Grelad smiled a twisted smile. "Oh. 10 septims. My, now my little Anya, you've outdone yourself." Grelad's smile soured into an ugly frown. "Yorick. Tell little Anya what you told me." Yorick, a boy only slightly older than Anya, sheepishly approached. Saw Anya eating a pastry down by the canal. Anya's spirit sank. The small moment of pleasure had come back to her in a horrific way. She swallowed and tried to avoid Grelad's gaze. "Well, Anya? Is this true?" "No. I promise I." Anya's response was cut off by a sharp slap to the side of her face. You insolent little bitch. You think you can steal from dear old Grelad? After I've been so good to care for you all these years. Anya sputtered through her quickly building tears. No, I promise I would never. So Yorick is a liar? No. I did eat a pastry, but a shopkeeper gave it to me. She said it was too burnt to sell and Grelad pushed Anya to the floor and started kicking her stomach. Don't you lie to me. You insolent wretch. Do you think I am a fool? Anya's screams and cries filled the mess hall of the orphanage. The other children, including Yorick, steeled their faces as they watched little Anya take the brunt of Grelad's vitriol. If you don't want to live here, perhaps you would like to live on the streets. Would you like that, Anya? Here I feed, clothe, and care for you. Out there, you would have to whore yourself to survive. Little Anya's cries and screams of "Gnome" continued to fill the air like an oppressive melody. After her beating, Grelad sent Anya to bed without supper. You should be full enough with that pastry. Supper is for good little girls who appreciate what they are given, said Grelad. Anya stifled her cries and looked out the window into the night sky. She thought of the kind stranger, her words, "What is a dog to a dragon?" Anya fought back rage. She couldn't figure out who to be mad at. Grelad had made her feel like an ungrateful child, and so she turned the hatred inwards. She began to knock her head so hard against the wall that it pushed the great wooden bed forward from the wall. It was then Anya noticed an old carving on the wall, lost to time until this moment. A+S. The court of the Jarl convened as it did every day. This day was the day for the poor to have audience and voice their needs to the hold. On days such as this, the people of times long since past had reached out to be cared for. Times were no longer so. What poor fools did arrive on days such as these, would inevitably be coerced into the servitude of the Blackbriar family. Those with enough wisdom would rather struggle on their own than risk owing a favor to that cartel. It happened on this day that a stranger in a cloak approached the throne of Layla Lawgiver. Layla's eyes narrowed, as she addressed the stranger. Who are you, and what do you want? The stranger replied, Jarl Layla, I am just a passer-through, however I was curious about something. In the cemetery there seems to be no marker for Eric Maru. Is he perhaps still alive in this city? Jarl Layla's brow began to furrow intensely. No, I believe that was a beggar boy that perished years ago. We don't give graves to people without families. How did Maru die? The air hung with the same coldness one might feel stealing the warmth from their lungs in Winterhold. What business of yours is it? Jarl Layla protested. You are awfully presumptuous to come into my court and demand answers about a long-since dead beggar. I have half a mind to have you put in the hold for a night so you may learn respect. To this, the stranger simply bowed before turning and walking away. Nobody had ever spoken to the Jarl of Riften in such an entitled and insolent way. What could she do though? Best to just go about her day. However, the interrogation about Eric Maru had reopened a long-forgotten memory in the Jarl's mind. Why would anyone ask about that? Who could care about a dead beggar and a thief? The sun beating down on the sewage couldn't deter Brynjolf. The new talent he had discovered in the market earlier in the day had him ready to believe the Thieves' Guild would be due for a rejuvenation. He had never seen anyone pick pockets with such skill. Brynjolf had asked the stranger to accompany him to the Ragged Flagon, to be welcomed into the guild. However, the stranger had turned her attention to some beggar girl covered in bruises. She said she would make her way through the Rataways in due time, so Brynjolf parted ways with her. A whisper in his ears brought him to an icy halt. He could have sworn he'd just heard. No, but that couldn't be. Kalia was gone, long gone. Still, As he lay falling asleep, the lens of his mind focused on the whispers he had felt in his ear earlier. Return it. Return the skeleton key. The day opened to the cry of a frenzied mob. Grelod the Kind had been found dead in her room, stripped naked and pinned to the wall by a dagger through the neck. On her body written, "What happens in the dark, comes to the light." Wild speculation began to abound about the question of who had killed Grelod. Not that many were upset to hear of the fate that befell her, still it was disturbing. Killed in her own home with no sign of a struggle nor a single hair out of place. It was enough to make the wrong people wary. The children were left to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Grelod's assistant Constance Michel, who had suffered greatly at her hand, was made the head of the orphanage. Her inexperience was displaced by her genuine care and affection for the children. As Constance and the children began to collectively settle into the new life without Grelod, Anya stayed in a deep state of thought. She had been asked about her bruises by the stranger, and the stranger had wrestled out the truth from her. Anya remembered the fire she saw in the stranger's eyes. It was like looking into the eyes of a dragon. Had this stranger killed Grelod? Should Anya tell anyone? Anya felt the pain of her still bruised ribs as she breathed. It wouldn't be so bad to keep this a secret. After all, Grelod had only been treated how she had treated others. Anya was glad she was dead. There was a new upstart in the Thieves' Guild. She was quiet and unassuming, but nobody had ever seen someone steal as stealthily as her. In short time they began to treat her as a sister, calling her Lightfoot. Nobody knew Lightfoot's real name, she refused to share it. All anyone knew is that if you wanted it stolen, you asked Lightfoot. Of course none amongst them was more proud of Lightfoot than her recruiter Brynjolf. It could be said Brynjolf had a pastime of teaching young aspiring thieves. Perhaps because this was all he ever knew. How some may view their own family, that was the way he understood the guild. Lightfoot was clearly meant for big things, to which Brynjolf had every intention to lead her. Do this well, Lightfoot, and you'll be in good with the Blackbriars. That's basically like being royalty here, although of course they won't want you mentioning it where others can hear. An opportunity had arisen for Lightfoot to get her name recognized. Brynjolf warmly paused as he waited her response. Lightfoot smiled, before quietly responding, "Well, it's always been my goal to have the Blackbriars in my debt." Her eyes, Brynjolf felt like he might drown in depths of her stare. He almost didn't catch what she had just said. "Easy there, lass," Brynjolf chided her, "appreciation and debt carry different meanings here. Wouldn't want them to get the wrong idea now." Lightfoot chuckled lightly, "Understood, sir." Horningbrew mead stopped coming into the inns lately, apparently their supply of meat had been ruined enough to completely cut off supply. Inngoers grumbled and moaned, the more expensive Blackbriar mead was now all that was available. Those that didn't have the coin went without, or else bought skooma and spilled out into the streets. The Blackbriar family had really done it this time. Sure, they lined their pockets, but the discontent among the people was palpable. More and more beggars were being thrown in the hold for throwing rotten food or jeering at the family as they passed from place to place. It truly began to feel like cracks were forming in Riften. So much pressure had built up within, it was only a matter of time before the cracks gave way. As she paced in her bedchambers, Jarl Layla thought of the boy. The more she remembered, the more uneasy she began to feel. The story of that boy was something she would rather put behind her, but she couldn't. 10 years ago, perhaps more, perhaps less, Maul had brought the body of a young man back from the woods outside town. I went to apprehend him for stealing from me, and he tried to run away. He fell off a cliff. The boy's face was badly disfigured, as though it had been repeatedly bashed in over and over. Jarl Layla had felt too afraid, too terrified of Maul and his employers, she simply believed him. It was only through the help of Grelad the Kind that the boy was even identified. That's him all right, Eric Maru. Nasty little thief he was, him and his little hussy. World is better off without the damn bastard. They threw his body into the sea. Jarl Layla had grieved privately for the boy, but ultimately she was just as beholden to the whims of the Blackbriars as anyone else. She put a pendant of kine around the poor boy's neck, only for it to be snatched off by Maul. She just wanted to forget. It wasn't her fault, so why did she feel responsible? It never lets up, does it? The overbearing workload of power. One might think Maven Blackbriar goes to sleep every night in serene bliss, covered in silk sheets scented of musk. One would be remiss, however, if they failed to consider the constant and ever-present fear of waking up to a knife in your belly, or poison in your throat. No, Maven Blackbriar does not escape such feelings. She feels suffocated by the silk and musk, as much as the beggars do from their rags and the stink of the canals. Nobody understands how difficult it is to wear the invisible crown. Maven is no less a prisoner than her brother in the hold. At least, that's what Maven would tell you. Tell you? Perhaps not. Maven doesn't even tell it to herself. A monster cannot become of nothing, and few know the darkness of Maven's life. None could bear that weight. However, a monster she remains. A monster in her heart. A boat rowed in today to the Riften dock. Early in the morning when Azura's light is just beginning to bleed through the mist. The first mate spotted something unusual as they approached, training his spyglass on an object hanging below the wooden structure. A body. Maven Blackbriar pushed through the crowd, furiously trying to catch a vision of what was attracting so much attention. That's when she saw him. Maul was hanging by the neck, dead for several hours. On his body carved were the words, "Down with Blackbriar." What was the guild without Mercer Fry? Mercer Fry had been like a father to many of them, teaching them in the art of stealing without being caught. Oh, but the poor sod tried to steal from the Daedric Queen of Theft. As surely as Mercer Fry used the shadows, Nocturnal used the shadows against him. He tried to steal her skeleton key. Kalia, Lightfoot, and Brynjolf. The three new nightingales of the Mother of Midnight's Darkness. Sent by the Daedric Prince to find Fry in an old farmer ruin. Fry was foolish as to try to escape darkness by going underground. The poor fool drowned under the weight of his sins, and a half-mile of water. So the three nightingales returned the skeleton key to Her Majesty of the Evergloam. So she blessed her new champions with powers of the unseen. The complete upheaval of the guild in the wake of the death of Mercer Fry fell upon the unsure shoulders of Brynjolf. He had tried to pass the guild onto Lightfoot. He believed her sure footing would balance the guild. However, Lightfoot nodded her head. Brynjolf, this is your family, this is your city, let this turbulent time shape you into a vehicle of something new. With that, Lightfoot left the guild, never to be seen as Lightfoot again. The city's oppression has begun to boil over. Maven Blackbriar, untethered from loss of her Maul, has begun to show her true face. Day by day the poor are crushed under the fist of Maven's guards. Jarl Layla now sits impotent on the throne. With no mead, no food, and no shelter, the poor and discontent have begun to rise up. The poor have become emboldened by the deaths of monsters once thought untouchable. Who is responsible for the decay of Riften? Perhaps it is not upon us to speculate. As surely as Nocturnal brings night and Azura brings the dawn, the city has continued to rot. The cries of the people in the town square reached a fever pitch. The entire city gathered outside the court of the Jarl. Guards bashed those who approached too closely with their shields. Then Maven gave her order, fire upon the rats, they come too close to the farmer's house. As her men began to fire arrows into the crowd, the fallen guild finally redeemed itself. For out of the shadows of the canals and alleys many a thief did emerge, halting the firestorm of the arrows. Brynjolf stood proud. This was his home, and he had enabled the whore Maven to oppress his own for long enough. He defiantly commanded his thieves to hold the position, protecting the mass of the poor. Little Anya, who stood bravely amongst the crowd, readied her strong little heart to find its rest in Sovngarde. Riften was breaking through their chains even if they had to die. Every beggar and shopkeep locked arms, brother sister and sister. Apart they were mice in the dark, ready to be preyed upon, but together they were a swarm. The fury of the crowd roared. Now finally, the cloaked stranger appeared in the center of the strife, standing atop the roof of the town well. Her form emerged from the shadows, like the voice of the downtrodden cutting through the mud. She threw off her cloak, revealing herself to her people. Her dark hair blew in the wind as she spoke her words that now live on in the soul of Riften. My brothers and sisters. My name is Sasha, and I am one of you. Too long we have been made to carry the burden of one family's greed. I say no longer. People of Riften. Today we take back what is ours. Today we show our jailers how loudly the caged bird sings. With this Sasha turned towards the guards of the Jarl and Blackbriars, fire in her eyes hotter than the breath of Alduin. She spoke only 3 words more, Foos. Row. Da. As the last syllable left her lips, a wave of power crashed upon the forces of the oppressors, sending them flying back. Riften spilled into the court of the Jarl, dragging Maven Blackbriar kicking and screaming, in her eyes reflect Sasha, hero of Riften, standing before the body of her home. So they did tar and feather Maven, stripping off her fineries, and forcing the putrid stink of the canal down her throat. Anya never did see the dragon of Riften again. In her heart she knew though, that wherever evil tried to inflict its cruelty on others in the pitch black of night, Sasha of Riften would be there to bring vengeance of the light of day. Dedicated to Lola.